Dams are now a thing of the past. So why are we focusing on dams so much when you have this resource, this free natural resource that's running through the center of your country? Dams, I think, are a dinosaur thing now. Climate activism, first it's tree plantations, then it's cleanup drives, then it's awareness sessions. Nothing is going to happen until you change the policy, the systems. Larger organizations who are conducting conferences and seminars and projects on climate change and being funded by Coke. I was like, what's up with that? Your disaster management authority ka ye mindset hai, to phir hum kahan gaye? We do have planning in place, we just don't have implementation. I think it all boils down to accountability in the end. Well, I don't think that you need a specific degree to get into climate change, or you don't need a passion to get into climate change. You know, it's very odd to have climate denialism in the first place. Why would you deny science? Why would you deny something that you can see? I've always been a very humanitarian kid. To be the Minister for Climate Change or the Prime Minister of Pakistan, I've actually never told anyone. Jokes and stuff. Oh, Ameera ke samne straws na use karo. Oh my god, Ameera, look, I used a straw. It's like, what? Sprite, for example, I was speaking on Sprite a few days ago and my Instagram got banned. No, it just like magically got banned right after I spoke on Sprite, and they deleted my comments everywhere, which was really weird. If change needed to come anywhere, this is where it could start. A multi-billion-dollar industry just openly polluting our oceans and then doing stuff like building a plastic road, or like plastic benches from recycled plastic, or having recycling plants. Did you know like only 9% of plastic in the world is recycled? Islamabad Pindi ko dekho to kitni zyada green coverage hai hamari. Where does the water have the space to go down into the ground? This is why in surrounding areas of Islamabad Pindi, the groundwater table might be slightly higher than it is in Islamabad Pindi, because we've covered it all in concrete. The environment, nature doesn't have an economic cost, right? It's free. Anyone can use it, free ground. We need a different way of viewing climate change and climate action.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to another episode of How Does It Work, a podcast by ProPakistani. Today we have Ameera Adil, climate change communicator and climate change activist on the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Acha, so firstly, for our audience, what does the term climate change activist or even communicator mean?
Right, so it means anyone who's interested in climate change and wants to change the things that currently are.
ठीक है. And आपकी एक organization भी है, what's that called?
It's called climate.org, so it's CLIM-8.org. It's very confusing.
And what does it do?
So I started it because I felt like the information that we have on climate change, Pakistan mein, it's not contextualized according to जो पाकिस्तानियों के लिए चाहिए होता है. The content that's produced is mostly produced by the global north, and that is something different to what Pakistan.
And what is the global north?
Developed countries, the countries who are the big emitters of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions. So for Pakistan being a smaller emitter, we need a different set of solutions and a different set of information to deal with this.
Okay. And considering the current situation in Pakistan, with the 30 plus million people affected, how much of that was due to climate change, and what can we do to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen in the future?
So it's complicated. First off, we have the third pole in the north, which means that after the north and south pole, the biggest chunk of glaciers on earth lies on the top of Pakistan. Achha. So with every passing year, they're melting at a rapidly faster pace. So around July or August, they start melting. Around June, July, they start melting, and all of that water then joins the Indus system. So that is one factor. Another factor is the monsoon rains that we had. They were on an extreme level, never before seen rains that we had. In some areas, record-breaking rains. So that was climate change as well, because how it works is with global warming, you have more evaporation, right? Because the hotter it is, the more the पानी evaporate करता है, तो उससे जो है आपकी cloud formation ज़्यादा होती है, उससे बारिश ज़्यादा होती है. तो climate change is basically affecting our entire system, water system, entire climate system.
And why is it getting hotter? Like, what's happening in the world? जिस तरह बहुत सारे लोगों को पता है कि there's, global warming, etc. लेकिन क्यों हो रही है?
Right. So when you burn like coal, oil or gas, तो ये carbon based materials होते हैं. So when you burn them, तो आपकी carbon dioxide produce होती है. Now carbon dioxide is a heat absorbing gas, which means that जितनी ज़्यादा carbon dioxide present होगी atmosphere में, तो उतनी ज़्यादा heat absorb होगी from the sun. And this is a completely natural process. It's why life exists on Earth. But the problem is that हमने इतनी ज़्यादा produce कर दिया अब that it's upsetting the natural system of the Earth. Now, there's not just carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases इनको कहते हैं, उसमें methane भी आ जाती है, nitrogen dioxide भी आ जाती है, काफ़ी सारी आती हैं, but the main culprit is carbon dioxide, and that is why the Earth is warming.
And we're already obviously like the advent of, say, for example, like eco-friendly cars, electric vehicles, things like that. We're doing things to reduce carbon dioxide footprint in the world. Do you think Pakistan में ये चीज़ें हो रही हैं या और होनी चाहिए? And do we need it as much as, say, what was it called? The North?
The Global North?
The Global North,
Yeah.
yes. Do we need it as much as them?
So this is where my organization comes in, because there's two things with climate change. There's mitigation and adaptation. The mitigation ये होती है कि आप carbon dioxide decrease कर रहे हैं from the atmosphere. You're either sucking it in or you're reducing the emissions. That's mitigation. And then there's adaptation, which means कि climate change जो already हो रहा है, ये होता रहेगा. All we can do is reduce जो आगे future में climate change होना है, because it's going to get rapidly worse. So that's adaptation. Now, for Pakistan, we're not big emitters. हमारी less than 1% of emissions बनती हैं total global scale पे. But we're one of the most affected countries. So उस सूरत में, do we really need to lower our carbon emissions, carbon footprint, or do we need to focus on dealing with the impacts of climate change? We need both, obviously, but it's more important that we focus on adaptation right now, because there's no work being done on it. We don't have a national adaptation plan. We don't have information that deals with adaptation. And this is what I talked about earlier, that the content that's present on the internet or the content that we have access to about climate change mostly focuses on mitigation. कि आपने carbon emission, carbon footprint किस तरह decrease करना है, because the developed countries need to focus on that. Yes.
So हमारा एक personalized plan नहीं है.
Yes.
Why are we one of the most affected countries?
Some of it is geographical, like I mentioned, that we have the glaciers in the north, and then we have all sorts of climate within Pakistan. But then a lot of it has to do with our governance, our infrastructure, and the population that we have. So climate change isn't something that is going to happen, or it's not a separate event. It just takes existing problems and makes them worse. That's all it does. So any problem that you already have in your socioeconomic circles, it's just going to exacerbate them. Yeah.
And give me like a doomsday scenario. What happens if we do nothing? This third pole that you mentioned, what happens to Pakistan if it continues to go down this way? I mean, what's the worst case scenario? I heard something about water being an issue in the future. Why are these things happening?
Well, that's the least of our problems, water being an issue. Pakistan is no longer going to be livable in the future.
Why?
Because with the warming climate, you're going to have more droughts, you're going to have more floods, you're going to have more of these disasters until it completely wipes us out.
We'll be like underwater. What will happen?
Well, projections are clear on the fact that the impacts are going to be severe, but then there are so many variables involved in this, so many impacts that we're going to be facing. We're unsure what it's going to be, because eventually all of these glaciers are going to melt. There's going to be no storage of water up there. But then I am talking about the next century or so, until our lifetimes we're going to be.
But for example, जिस तरह the governments और बहुत सारे और ऐसे लोग हैं जो they're taking some initiatives. There was a dam initiative, for example, Imran Khan के दौर में. Are these initiatives going to help?
Not really.
Why?
Not in my personal opinion, because the thing is, dams are now a thing of the past.
Achha.
Yeah, if you see the developed countries, they're mostly taking down their dam projects, or they're reducing that, because a lot of people give me the example of China. 3 Gorges Dam is very successful and everything, but I don't think that's applicable to Pakistan. First off, it's a huge cost to bear. You take out loans to build a dam. It takes a decade to build the dam, and अभी पिछले decade से इस decade तक solar energy कितनी सस्ती हुई है. By 2017, solar energy was the cheapest form of energy in the world. And in the next decade, what possible technological revolutions could we have in that? So एक तो ये है कि it's financially not that great of an investment. For example, the Neelam Jhelum Dam that you had, it was built in about $6 billion.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's producing around 440 megawatts of electricity. So if you do the math, that's 6,000 rupees per watt.
Okay.
Yeah.
In comparison to, let's say, if we'd done the same thing with solar or something else, it would have been cheaper.
It would have been cheaper because I don't know if it's comparable, but with solar, you also have a decentralized option, which means that it's not necessary that you have a centralized energy system with solar, right? You can have solar above a building and you can be producing your own energy the entire time. So that sort of options are now becoming more available, and they're becoming rapidly cheaper as well over the long term. So with dams, there's two arguments, right? There's how do we produce our energy? How do we manage our agriculture and storage? So now this is something that I'm quoting Dr. Hassan Abbas, who is a leading hydrologist in Pakistan. I learned from him that in the Indus River system, you have the entire country and the Indus River is running through it, right? Like a big vein. And there's no lining below the river, obviously, which means all of that water is being absorbed as well as rushing through, right? So it's naturally replenishing our aquifer, freshwater aquifer below. So the storage that we have below River Indus is 500 million acre feet. And our daily requirements, domestic and industrial, on a yearly basis, is I think less than 15 million acre feet. And maximum requirements of agriculture are 100 million acre feet.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have an extra 400-something acre feet, 300-something.
And why is that a bad thing?
That's not a bad thing.
Okay, it's a good thing.
That's an untapped resource that we have.
Okay.
So why are we focusing on dams so much when you have this resource, this free natural resource that's running through the center of your country that you can tap into? And you can potentially not run out of water, because we're told that 30 days की storage capacity होती है पाकिस्तान में हमारे पास. This is what we hear about all the time. That's your man-made storage. What about your natural resources? Why aren't we using those? So dams, I think, are a dinosaur thing now.
And okay, if dams are not the answer, what are things that we'll get to on a personal level कि मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ, people like me क्या कर सकते हैं, लेकिन what can our government or governments do? एक तो आपने policy की बात की, that's missing. What else is missing?
Right. So a large number of people in Islamabad even use groundwater. Almost हर घर में boring होती है. Over 70% of our irrigation is done through groundwater resources, as far as I know.
By the way, मैंने सुना है कि boring में अब जिस तरह पहले you were, I don't know, 40 feet पे पानी आ रहा था, तो अब 100 feet पे आ रहा है. And there's a shortage. Is that true, or is that just okay? So why is that happening? Because
the more you're consuming groundwater, it takes a longer time to replenish it. Plus, Islamabad Pindi ko dekho to kitni zyada green coverage hai hamari. Where does the water have the space to go down into the ground? This is why in surrounding areas of Islamabad Pindi, the groundwater table might be slightly higher than it is in Islamabad Pindi, because we've covered it all in concrete. But there are solutions to this, and this is something that the government could focus on potentially, because this is a great resource again. Because if so many people are already using groundwater, it means it's easy to access than, say, having like dams give us water. वो एक unreliable resource बन चुका है at this point. So replenishing groundwater, it's something we can do at an individual level and at a policy government level as well.
And how can we do it on an individual level? What can we do? Right.
So your rooftop, it can be a catchment area. तो उसका मतलब ये है कि आपकी सिर्फ ड्रेन की ज़रूरत होती है, आपकी साइड स्लाइटली स्लोप एनीवे बनी होती है. That's a requirement by CDA. The drain goes down, you dig a hole, it goes straight through. You're helping fix the aquifer levels. So simple.
And what else can we do? So let's say on an individual level now, मतलब मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ? And firstly though, what are people doing currently that's helping, and what can we do to help?
I'm not a big fan of propagating individual action, because the thing with climate change is that everything is very political and very politicized, even if we don't realize it. With Pakistan, that's less of a problem, because everyone is on the same page with climate change. Because हम देख रहे हैं कि हो रहा है हमारे साथ ये, there's no room for deniability. But on the larger global scale, हर साल एक conference होती है, Conference of Parties, COP. इस साल इजिप्ट में COP27 होना है. Now, the thing is, what are you dealing with at these conferences at a global level? You're dealing with कि आपने किस तरह fossil fuel emissions ख़त्म करनी है, fossil fuels को किस तरह ख़त्म करनी है, because that's what's causing climate change. And आपने किस तरह finance करना है developing countries को like Pakistan to help them deal with the adaptation plans and stuff. Now, the thing is कि at COP26 last year, the largest delegation that was present over there out of any country was the fossil fuel delegation.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have the people that you're trying to ban on the table with discussions with you. Okay? The people who are creating these problems in the first place are there deciding what happens to them. That's not how it's going to work.
So the lobbying is the problem.
The lobbying is the problem. And the term carbon footprint itself was invented by British Petroleum. Yeah. And it was done in an attempt to push responsibility from the corporation to individuals.
So they're basically blaming us for a problem that they're creating themselves.
Yes.
And I mean, I know there's some awareness about this, but these large corporations, be it petroleum or fossil fuels, even big tobacco for that matter, they always seem to win, and eventually they will win. So does that mean that we should just ignore it or do nothing about it? What can we do we can't stop British Petroleum from, being the powerhouse that they are. That's just the way the world works. So what do we do?
Well, the thing is, that's where the politicization comes in. Because when you get into climate activism, first it's tree plantations, then it's cleanup drives, then it's awareness sessions, and then eventually you realize that nothing is going to happen until you change the policy, the systems. And one way to do that is by protesting. Another way to do that is by, helping the government find a solution towards this. Now, the thing that we really need right now is to curb their actions through policies.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is कि आपकी industries जो pollute कर रही होती हैं, why do they have a license to pollute in the first place? Like, why don't they have a fine to dump their waste out into the environment? उसकी reason ये होता है कि the environment, nature doesn't have an economic cost, right? It's free. Anyone can use it, free ground. But if there was a cost to polluting nature, which there is actually, but there's not much research, there's not much connections made upon that. So if that was done, then it would be very expensive for them to pollute in the first place.
And do you think that the primary problem, and I sometimes think this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because it's it's 100 years from now, it's 50 years from now, it's 20 years from now. It's sort of like so many people told us COVID was coming, and we chose to ignore it. And abhi jis tarah, the situation that's going on in Pakistan and all those affected, hum unki madad karna chahte hain, obviously. I mean, there's people who've lost their homes, and it's emotional, and we want to be up there, and we want to help build the houses. But मैं हमेशा इस तरह सोचता हूँ कि when I was younger, earthquake आया था इस्लामाबाद में, कश्मीर में, हर जगह पाकिस्तान में. So many people unfortunately lost their lives, and so many people, पाकिस्तान में लोगों के बहुत बड़े दिल हैं, and they help a lot, right? And there's a very big charitable part of our personalities, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
लेकिन वो जो long term है, मिसाल के तौर पे, I was talking to someone about this that day कि अच्छा earthquake आया, everyone was affected, everyone lost someone they knew. उसके बाद how many of us like now who live in apartment buildings live in earthquake proof buildings? How many of us have done anything? We're in a zone in Islamabad that is always in somewhat of danger.
Yes.
हमने कुछ बदला? कुछ भी नहीं बदला. Did the real estate developers start developing earthquake proof? और जब आप एक real estate developer से पूछो, quite a few of them I've asked कि आप क्यों नहीं बनाते? They're like, यार वो extra cost हम consumer पे डालते हैं, consumer कहता है हमें चाहिए नहीं है. And हमारी building बिकती नहीं है. Is the problem for all mankind कि we're like, that's the next generation's problem, ये हमारा मसला नहीं है? Do you think that's the primary issue?
No, I think it's a governance issue. Because आप किसी बाहर के मुल्क में जाओ ना, तो you're not allowed to like construct your house an inch to the left of what the requirement is. So I think it's a governance thing. If the government was stringent enough on their controls, policies, वगैरह, so things would have been different. Yeah.
And in terms of the government, अब for example वो अगर करते भी हैं तो हमारे पाकिस्तान में, इस्लामाबाद में for example, how many buildings have NOCs? They don't even have NOCs. So it's not like the law is being followed anyways.
Yes.
And in that scenario, if everyone got up, of course this is an ideal world where everybody gets up and says कि यार we'll pay the extra amount agar aap earthquake proof banaye ya whatever it takes. Matlab, Karachi, for example, gets flooded every year almost, right? And no one talks about actually developing the infrastructure to stop that. We just feel bad for them when it happens. Has there ever been a country or a situation where people actually get up all together and make those changes?
Unfortunately, we see this stuff all around the world. So in America, I was reading this book called The Intersectional Environmentalist, and the author talks about how जो black communities हैं उधर जो है cancer rates बहुत high थे किसी एक specific black community में, and when that person started doing research on why that was happening, it turns out कि वो community बनाई ऐसी जगह थी जहाँ एक industry pollution वहाँ specifically आ रही थी, and so those areas are cheaper for real estate and stuff, and so people who cannot afford that tend to live there. So that we can see a lot of that in Pakistan as well, कि the cheaper hotels would be on the side of the road या कहीं इस तरह जगह बनी होगी जो that would be generally cheaper, road side पे वो सारी चीज़ें जो encroachment वगैरह. So this is very much a socio-economic problem as well, which makes me, my personal opinion about this is कि climate change we need to stop viewing it as like a singular problem, something that a Ministry of Climate Change can solve. Essentially, it's like a human rights thing. It's like, I mean, for example, the Ministry of Climate Change हमारे पास है, ठीक है. How can it influence the policies of energy or education or security or anything like that?
It's secluded.
It's secluded. There is no overarching control that it has over anything else. And I'm not saying that it should be in control. I'm just saying we need a different way of viewing climate change and climate action.
How did you find yourself in this world of climate change? I mean, it's not exactly common, I guess, in Pakistan. And first, 2 questions actually. The first question being, does what you do make money? And secondly, how did you get into this? Because I don't think there's a degree for this or anything like this. So how did this come about?
There's no money in this.
No, but you have to make a living, right? I mean,
yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, but my career has been very. It's been very random. I've been working for free for the past 7 to 8 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, while I was studying, it was activism going on and stuff, creating content for free, all of that. But then I got a job. I started editing, got some money making over there. Then I got a job at an INGO, and then I'm working at NUS now. In their Office of Sustainability. Okay. So this is the most relevant job that I've had so far, and it's taken me a long time to get here. So yeah, there's next to no money over here, but now as much as I'm growing, I'm learning that there could have been options for me. There could have been like paths that I could have taken that would have made money for me.
And how did you know that this is what you wanted to do with your life?
I've always been a very humanitarian kid.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I've been very stressed about people who are affected by different things and stuff. And the reason that it translated into this was because I was looking for something fun to study in university.
Okay.
Yeah. And,
where did you study?
NUST.
Okay.
Yeah, environmental engineering.
Wow.
Yeah.
They have an environmental engineering course. That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
We have a separate department for environmental engineering. But the fun part is that I wasn't taught about climate change over there.
Achha.
Yeah, the environment and climate are apparently very separate things.
How does that work? Aren't they the same? I mean,
no,
the environment is what we're affecting with climate, as in?
So environmental degradation is something different because it mostly deals with air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, maybe transportation, stuff like that. Some things that you can see.
But isn't all of that what's causing the climate change?
No.
Okay, what's causing the climate change then?
It's just carbon dioxide and
it's
greenhouse
just the
gas
carbon dioxide.
emissions.
So the air pollution, etc., is not bad for. Okay, but that's bad for other stuff.
Of course, yeah. It contributes in small quantities, but it's not the main driver of climate change.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Again, layman question. You know, when I was younger, there was a lot of talk about the ozone layer and the effects it was happening. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, people stopped talking about the ozone layer as much. Why was that?
So in the 1980s, there was a pact. It was called the Montreal Protocol.
Okay.
Usme they decided to stop using CFCs. Now, CFCs were the thing that were causing the ozone layer to deplete in the first place. So, in 1989 or 87 mein ho chuki hai baat khatam.
And we're good now.
Yeah, they banned CFCs. The ozone layer is healing, and everything's fine now.
That's perfect. So we've solved that problem. We're good to go. We don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, but the problem with fossil fuels is that they have a much bigger lobby than the CFCs ever did. So the fossil fuel lobby actually knew about climate change since 1940s.
Okay.
Yeah, their scientists did research and they purposefully hid that research. And this is talked about in Michael E. Mann's book called The New Climate War. He's one of the leading climate scientists in the world.
Okay.
So fossil fuel lobbies, they purposefully had an agenda to fuel climate denialism. Because, it's very odd to have climate denialism in the first place. Why would you deny science? Why would you deny something that you can see?
Because it's money on the other side.
Yeah, it's propaganda.
It makes complete sense, I think, if you look at it from a capitalistic point of view.
Yeah.
Unke dhanda band kar rahe hain na?
Exactly.
Sorry, so we got a little sidetracked with my questions. So when did you realize that climate change was what you wanted to focus on? You're in NUST, you're studying environmental engineering.
Yeah,
What happens?
Yeah,
next?
so I was first focused on plastic pollution.
Okay.
Let's end plastic and stuff like that. Then I was focused on veganism. And then, it was a whole journey.
Veganism. And plastic. I have questions again, sorry. Achha, so the plastic, changes, especially abroad, I've started noticing, with straws, everything, even with bags you take to that's good. And why do we need to end plastic? Like, what's wrong with plastic? What does it do exactly?
Plastic is made from fossil fuels.
Okay.
And then it just never biodegrades.
Okay.
As in, it never goes away from the environment. So what it does is, wherever it is, it's going to be consumed by a living thing. For example, plastic bags, when they're in the water, they look like jellyfish. And so a lot of animals eat that. And then they, die. And their populations are rapidly decreasing because of that. But also, plastic has a very real health impact on us. Like, for example, now in our bodies, we have like a credit card worth of plastic in our bodies at any given moment.
How does that happen?
Because like I said, plastic doesn't degrade, but it just crumbles into very, very small particles called microplastics. And then we consume those microplastics because those microplastics are consumed by our food, animals and fish and stuff. Yeah.
And we're doing good in terms of the plastic stuff because, at least it seems like internationally. I saw even there's so many businesses that have come out of it. I saw this chopstick brand, for example.
Yeah.
Again, we're detracking, but I just found it interesting.
Yeah.
Where you can eat the chopsticks once you're done eating from the chopsticks.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. But now to go into food, right? And are you a vegan?
No.
Okay. But you...
I used to be. It used to affect my health a lot. And then I realized that it's not my job to think about veganism when, because... Well, I've lived in London as well. And when I went there, I saw the numerous opportunities that I had to buy stuff that was vegan, plant-based food. And I didn't have to starve myself for it. In Pakistan, I was eating naan every day.
Because
that's it.
So I used to live in London as well. And I had some friends who were vegan. And I am not vegan. I love meat. But I would go with them to vegan restaurants, and actually the food is pretty good. I'd enjoy it actually. Because I was shocked. I was like, "Yaar, ye kya hoga? It has nothing in it. None of the good stuff, right?"
But this also circles back to the thing you said about electric vehicles. See, if you have the resources available, then you can speak about individual action. Na ke log kyun nahi kar rahe?
Ye karo, ye wo karo.
Udhar to incentives hain is cheez ke liye.
But why is veganism good? Is it for animal protection?
No.
Then why should we be vegan?
Animal protection is another thing altogether, but so with climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, when I mentioned Kiana, that's the main driver of it. So we have carbon dioxide, and then we have methane, which is several times more potent than carbon dioxide at absorbing heat.
Right.
So agriculture contributes to about 24% of global greenhouse gas emissions through methane, because cows and cattle in general, they burp and fart methane.
Okay.
Yes.
What?
It's a process in their bodies called enteric fermentation.
Acha.
So they burp and fart methane, and jitni zyada hum produce karte hain, them for food, so utni zyada hamare paas methane aati hai. Yes. So the entire industry contributes significantly to, it's the second largest contributor to climate change.
So if we all became vegan,
that's not an option.
I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to figure this. So and why do they burp and fart methane? As in that, why does that happen? That is make any sense to me. I don't understand it.
They eat grass, right?
Yeah.
So you need grass has some like chemicals that you need to digest, and to digest that they need to burp and fart methane. Like उनके bodies में वो process ऐसा होता है. If you change their diets, that has shown significant results in like reducing the methane consumption.
Change their diets. How? What do they eat then?
I don't know, seaweed or something. कुछ इस तरह की research हुई थी. But like I didn't study that.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you decided not to be vegan because it was affecting your health.
Yes.
Okay, and you decided to move away from plastic, move away from veganism. Now where did we go next before we got to climate change?
That's it.
Then we got to climate change.
That's when I started realizing that something has to give. Like, individual action isn't doing much. Like, I want to make a bigger impact. And how do I make a bigger impact? And that's when I realized that, politics is the way to go. So for the longest time, I actually wanted to be the Minister for Climate Change or the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I've actually never told anyone this before.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, good luck with that. I hope you do become the Prime Minister. And if you guys are watching, we have the Prime Minister of Pakistan. No, I'm kidding.
That's not in the plans anymore. That's not in the books anymore. Yeah.
Wait, why is it not in the works anymore?
Because I believe that the biggest change that I can make is through education.
Okay.
Because like I mentioned before, Pakistani people, they're very much on one page, that is, as I've seen. Everyone's very aware of climate change and they want to do something about it. And like you said, we have such a generous spirit. Like, we want to fix our problems. We just don't know how to do that. So I want to be the one to like guide make the guidebook, playbook on how to do that. Yeah.
And how will education change things? Like, I mean, if we're talking if we're all on the same page, then why do we need the education?
Well, because we know the problem, we just don't know what to do about it. Right? So you have the floods happen. You had it happen in 2010 as well. And we had strategies and assessment reports and whatnot. What happened after that? So I'm sure that people who are in power know somewhat about what to do about climate change, and these NGOs, they know a lot about climate change and climate action. But until and unless the people of Pakistan know what to do as well, they can't hold the government accountable. They need to know what's happening to them because of their lack of action.
Right. And currently with the situation and the floods and everything, what can we do? Are there any charities that you're working with? Anything? A lot of people want to help. They don't know who to go to. This is a problem in Pakistan when you're looking to, donate money or even your time sometimes. You just don't know कि किधर जाएं, किससे. अब वो वाली बातें शुरू हो जाती है ना कि यार हमारे पैसे चोरी तो नहीं कर रहे, corruption तो नहीं चल रही, etc. Of course, most of the organizations are doing good work, but are there any organizations in particular that you're working with or anything that you would recommend for our viewers?
So one of my friends is working with Women Democratic Front, and she's gathering donations for this cause. So I'm mostly donating over there for her. But my parents use ED Foundation, so that's also something that I trust. And then there are so many people who are working. There's so many options, honestly, to donate and stuff. A lot of people in D12, where I live, are collecting funds and giving them to the army because they think they have greater reach and stuff. I think right now what's needed right now is some sort of coordination between all of these groups that are working that I think only the government can manage. So, but yeah, for me personally, Women Democratic Front, but
fair enough.
I feel bad for all the organizations that I'm not mentioning because everyone's doing amazing work.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So you mentioned your parents, and this is an interesting segue.
Yeah.
How did they feel about you pursuing a career in climate change? Except Pakistani parents generally. I don't know about yours specifically. लेकिन हमें ऐसी non-doctor, lawyer, engineer degree समझ नहीं आती.
No, so I did become an environmental engineer.
Wow, so technically you were
technically engineering, but
it was after that when you went into climate change. Was there a conversation to be had with your parents, or were they also on the same page?
Well, I've always been very headstrong about what I wanted to do. For some reason, I was very sure that this was what I was being called for. It's just that when you learn about climate change, there's no way that you can go back to not knowing about it, to ignoring it, because it's such a serious thing and there's so few people working on it. You're like, I am needed here. I need to do this. So there was no question of, whether or not I'm going to do it because of parental approval or societal approval. But yes, in the beginning it was very tough because I used to get made fun of by my friends and my family. And
what sort of criticism did you receive?
Well, they just make fun of what I do, right? They just
I can understand that in
they
Pakistan,
just
yeah.
make jokes and stuff. Oh, yeah, Ameera ke samne straws na use karo. Oh my God, Ameera, look, I used a straw. It's like, what?
No, fair enough.
Why are you doing
But I can see that happening. But
Yeah.
that's probably everywhere, right? Is it just Pakistan, you think, or is it?
No, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. People get bullied for things they're passionate about all the time. It's no big deal. But it changed very rapidly. Like right after I started my organization and started collaborating with organizations and stuff. Things changed a lot for me. I get invited to speak a lot at public forums, and then all of a sudden people started taking me seriously and started talking to me about climate change. Ke, oh, acha, ye kyun hota hai? Ye kya hai? And that was the end goal. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm where I wanted to be. And now I've gotten my dad into climate change as well. So, yeah.
Out of curiosity, what does your dad do for a living?
He's a nuclear analyst.
Okay.
He's the Dean of Strategic Studies at Air University right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get him into climate security. And, he's getting there. He's very excited
Fair enough,
about
yeah.
it.
I was like, if he works at British Petroleum, that would
No,
have been amazing, actually. Because I was like, please, koi controversial jagah pe kaam kare. Khair. But that's good. No, so you mentioned something which is also very interesting. The whole thought leadership thing, right? So if you get invited to speak to a couple of, in a couple of places, like we were at a TED Talk together, etc., people all of a sudden take what you were saying 2 years ago more seriously just because some other people also took it more seriously.
Yes.
How do you feel like, in terms of these things, what can you do to get more recognition, right? So, of course, there's talking at different academic and other places. There's what can you do now to elevate the conversation?
I think coordination is the biggest thing that we need right now. So for education, I'm already working towards that, creating content and developing like other resources to like books and stuff. So that's something I'm working on by myself. But I feel like there's a very big lack of communication and coordination between the people who are already working on climate change in Pakistan. And again, I feel that's there because we don't yet understand कि climate change का scope क्या है. So if we sort of like give up the term climate change, or not give up, but we sort of like look beyond it to incorporate everything else. For example, should disaster risk and management come under climate change? Should like health and safety come under climate change and stuff like that, questions like that. So I really do think that in Pakistan, we need to expand the scope of conversation around climate change, and that's going to get us to more places.
Okay.
Because abhi bahut secluded isolation type ki baatein hoti hain.
And does the entertainment and media landscape need to also play its part? So, for example, like those who entertain you have the eyeballs. Should they be more involved, whether that's TV channels, publications like ProPakistani, for example, or anyone else? Is that important?
I think what's important is for influencers to stop promoting brands that are damaging the environment. I think that's the biggest place to start, because otherwise news and media is going to go where the news and media is, essentially. You're going to report what's important right now. But for influencers, they're basically increasing sales and marketing of the companies who are contributing to this issue. So for Sprite, for example, I was speaking on Sprite a few days ago and my Instagram got banned for a while. Yeah.
I saw the Sprite. Why did it get banned?
Yeah, I don't know. It just like magically got banned right after I spoke on Sprite, and they deleted my comments everywhere, which was really weird and sus. Maybe it was a different thing, but khair. The problem with Sprite is that it's owned by Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is one of the biggest plastic polluter of the oceans in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd imagine, because Coke is more readily available than running water, apparently.
Yes.
So if it is, then they must be making a lot of plastic.
Yes, but that's all they produce, right? Because a lot of water companies are owned by Coca-Cola as well. And it's just that if change needed to come anywhere, this is where it could start. Multi-billion-dollar industry just openly polluting our oceans, and then doing stuff like building a plastic road or like plastic benches from recycled plastic, or having recycling plants. Did you know like only 9% of plastic in the world is recycled?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's stuff like this that makes me really frustrated, because they pretend like they're doing a lot, but in reality, they're just doing more harm than good. But they're greenwashing their image. That's a real term, greenwashing.
Yeah, that's also the first time I've heard that term. लेकिन वो बेचारा influencer क्या करे? If Coke pays him 3 times the amount of money, I mean, the problem becomes those with a voice don't have the financial muscle of the larger organizations, i.e. Coca-Cola, British Petroleum, etc. How do you fight that war? I mean, and we're also slaves to, मतलब हमने भी तो चूल्हे चलाने हैं, हमने भी तो कुछ करना है. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's walking away from Coke money. They should.
Of course.
They should. But would they? Would anyone? I mean, it gets hard. If you're getting banned for a Sprite comment, I mean, influencers may not do
Allegedly.
it. Allegedly. But it's tough, right? It's tough for everyone.
Tough. It's very tough. But I'm not talking about people who are going to be affected by this. There are a lot of people who do this who are not going to be affected by this, especially like larger organizations who are conducting conferences and seminars and projects on climate change and being funded by Coke.
Nice.
Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, that's weird.
That is
it's
weird.
A bit off.
Yeah, and these organizations, they make millions of dollars. Otherwise, they're gonna work one way or another without the Coke money too. So it's on that scale that I'm talking about, that they need to stop promoting these organizations who are causing the problem in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of like the kinds of entertainment, like, you know, when I was a kid, there was this show called Captain Planet. Was it? Have you ever seen it? I felt like they were forcing me to like the planet. Like it was cringy. Like a lot of people liked it. I don't know. I hated it. Like I hated it. I wanted Captain Pollution to win because I was just like, this. So they're forcing me to like something. Do you sometimes think हम जब climate change या इस तरह के topics के बारे में बात करते हैं, instead of trying to make it entertaining, we just make it very like, you know,
Absolutely.
it's too forceful.
Absolutely. That's why I said that maybe we need to ditch the term altogether. Maybe this needs to be a thing that we talk about in passing. You know, that it's just cool to like this man, like this character just says something in passing. Ke, oh, don't throw like this plastic bottle out there. And if like one person a popular character that's really liked by kids says that could have a bigger influence on that child than having an entire show dedicated to climate change. So I think it needs to be incorporated into everything rather than having a separate thing. And
the same goes for the terms, right? So when you call it climate change, I always think, oh, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
That's, you know, your problem. Or whoever's in climate change's problem. We always think, oh, okay, not our problem. You know what I mean? It becomes, instead of putting it like, you know, like the way, for example, the West is now adopting more liberal processes, they're just putting it into shows. And you know, in this part of the world that might be controversial, but over there, what they're doing now is they're putting LGBTQ or whatever into a segment, subtly putting into it, and eventually the children that grow up in this day and age won't know the difference, right?
It gets normalized.
It gets normalized. That is a much more effective route, I think, than you know, I don't know, the odd in-your-face show that we come up with. And sometimes I think the biggest problem with climate change is it's just not as, it's so far, it always feels like it's not my problem, it's my kid's problem. So whatever, right? Like flood abhi jo ho raha hai, victims abhi jo affected hain, unke liye kapde, unke liye khana, unke liye, and obviously they're without a house, so you have to do that. But this always feels like tomorrow's problem. It's like the pandemic, right? When everyone was predicting it, none of us took it seriously.
Yeah. But I have a question for you. We're having a podcast on the topic of climate change and the floods right now. So do you think that this is more effective, or having a line of climate change inserted into every one of your podcasts would be more effective?
It would be more effective if I put a line of climate change into every one of my podcasts. The problem would be, how do I bring it up? We'll talk about this afterwards. Randomly beach mein. But yes, it should be. As in, you're right. It would make much bigger a difference. And also the other thing is, had the floods not been happening, and myself included, would we be having this conversation right now? To hota ye hai ki jab tak, you know, it doesn't hit the fan, we don't talk about it. And this is myself included. Like we have this problem as a race or as a mankind in general. कि हम जब तक, you know, it's not at the absolute peak, हम तो बात ही नहीं करेंगे इसके बारे में. क्या फर्क पड़ता है?
The problem is that there is going to be no peak. It's going to be such a gradual process that you're not going to notice when it gets bad, because it already is pretty bad.
Yeah.
You have the droughts in Europe, you have the floods in Pakistan. Next year there's going to be like maybe droughts here, floods over there, torrential monsoon rains, insane weather that we're seeing right now. But it just gets lost in translation, right? So I was reading this tweet by, I forgot her name now, I think Amna Shifkat or someone. She's another person who works in this sector. And she said that when she went to get for an interview at NDMA or something, which is National Disaster Management Authority, they looked at her degree and said, you're an environmental scientist. We don't deal with like pre-disaster masle, we deal with post-disaster management.
So like something has to go wrong before.
Yeah, and it's like, what's up with that? Your disaster management authority ka ye mindset hai, to phir hum kahan gaye?
There's no preventative measures.
Yeah. We just wait for it to happen and then we deal with it.
But I guess that's always been a problem, right?
In Pakistan, yes. But I think we can look beyond that if we just like have a little bit of planning in place. Actually, we do have planning in place. We just don't have implementation. I think it all boils down to accountability in the end.
And my last question, and then I'll let you go. What do you hope for in your career? You're obviously very young right now. So towards the twilight of career, where do you hope to have gotten? And where do you hope the change can be made? And what do you sort of see as a roadmap now for someone who sort of wants to get into a similar field as you? Like, what should one do?
Interesting. The problem is that, like I mentioned, I'm at this place where I'm just realizing I am where I wanted to be. So now I have a new plan to make for myself. But I already have my organization, and I want to grow that into having like a sort of global impact on climate change education and communication. Because again, this is all communication. Like how we portray climate change is, I think, as important as what research is being done or what, the background, the action is being done. Because that's what makes the most impact to the people. But as for people who want to get into this, and I think I said this in my TED Talk as well, I don't think that you need a specific degree to get into climate change, or you don't need a passion to get into climate change. So this group of medical students came up to me, and they said that they wanted to work on climate change, and they were collecting like litter off of beaches and sort of having awareness sessions and stuff. And I was like, why don't you have research towards health and climate change? I don't see that being done in Pakistan. So why don't you work on the health sector where you're already working and sort of try to incorporate how climate change affects your sector? I mean, that would be like an out there thing because it's not being done, and then you're gonna get even more recognition than you would get doing awareness sessions, and you would know more about it as well. You would be the experts of that, I'd say. So it's just things like this. We don't really need to go out of our comfort zones to work on this. We can do what we're already doing and sort of see where climate change comes into play with us. Like, this is an example, like what you're doing right now is an example of that, right? Koi flood hua, so you just engaged a climate activist to talk about it. And that is part of what it is.
Yeah. To try and inculcate it into anything that you're doing and try to make it an everyday conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Shayan, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and we'll see you next time.